There are so many things that I'd like to share about what's going on. And I'm gonna just go really fast through it because there's a lot of information, and then that way we'll have more time at the end for questions and clarification. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. When I first started fighting Common Core about 4 years ago, I am a math education professor, so when the new standards came out, I noticed that they were about 1 to 2 years behind where we used to be. And instead of doing double-digit multiplication in 3rd grade, like I used to teach people how to teach to do that, they had moved that to 5th grade. Instead of doing long division in 3rd grade, that had been moved to 5th grade. And so many things were missing and just moved back. And then I heard everyone saying how these standards were rigorous and internationally benchmarked, and I knew it wasn't true. So that's what really got me started. I ran and I got elected to a local board of education. And then from there, I found that I couldn't stop Common Core there either. Because once we had taken a vote and we voted for Common Core, school board members have a code of ethics that they can't talk about minority opinions, which I was in the minority after the vote's taken. So I discovered so many different ways our elected representation was being taken away from us, and we were really being run by, who knows who was running, what was going on. But I was bound to find out. Here's how we lost our academic independence. So many different ways. And at first they wanted to say, well, it was the governor and the state school superintendent who signed on to race to the top, which is why we had to get Common Core. So what did I do? Oh, if it's a state school superintendent, I'll just run for that. And then I'll stop Common Core that way. And I realized, even with Richard Woods in there, he's sort of like the Queen of England. He really can't do anything to stop Common Core. Everybody's around in him, and they won't let him stop it. We lost our academic freedom through grants, through state legislation, even though nobody's talking about that one. But it's happening under the radar. Through our certification programs, through charter schools, through waivers from No Child Left Behind, even our accreditation agencies are the means by which Common Core has taken over our educational system. So we're going to talk about all the different ways. Our whole elected form of representation for schools is just crumbling. Now, here's an example. You'll hear people say, Common Core is a state-led initiative. And it came from Georgia, it's in Georgia. And that's just totally not true. This is a textbook from a Georgia public school. And this is the support materials for math in 4th grade. And here's what it says on the inside cover about Common Core. It says the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices and the Council of Chief State School Officers are the sole owners and developers of the Common Core State Standards, copyright 2010. They developed it, they own it. Well, who are they? Are they a government organization? No. They're a private organization who's owned by somebody else. Doesn't really have anything to do with elected officials, but it sounds like it does. This is what we're using in our public schools in Georgia. Here is a form that teachers would have to fill out when they go to select textbooks. It's the textbook evaluator form. They say, well, teachers need to have input into what resources are selected. But then when you look at the second page, it's very important that they have the Common Core copyright. So now we have a private organization that owns public standards that can sell the rights to the copyright to these public standards only to certain publishers. So we have a monopoly and teachers cannot select materials that are not Common Core copyrighted. This happens to be a form that teachers use to adopt a new reading series that we adopted this past year. Now, even though the code says, this is from the Georgia Code, that changes in educational standards need to be reported, the proposed changes to local school systems and the General Assembly for review, that has not happened. we don't like these standards, but that didn't happen. The state legislator would have had an opportunity to say they didn't like them, but that didn't happen. So then you hear them talking about standards and curriculum. They'll say, oh, these are standards, but it's not curriculum. We just have these standards, but you can use whatever books and whatever curriculum you want. The problem with that is the definition of the standards is the same as the definition for curriculum. The standards also have ways of teaching. The curriculum never had ways of teaching. They just had the knowledge that was to be learned. These standards are more intrusive, more overarching, more micromanaging than curriculum because they're telling us how to teach something. And in my opinion, as a math education professor, they're not giving us the right way for every student to learn it. Also, if you look at the new certification system, this is an example of my old teaching certificate. It said either T or L. T for teaching, L for leadership. Now, this past year, I got a new certificate. It says SRT. That means that even though I have 27 years of experience, I do not have what is necessary to have the highest level of certification, even with a doctorate in 27 years. I need to meet the performance-based requirements of the professional certificate. These performance-based requirements are outcomes-based education. In order to get the highest levels of a certificate, I have to do outcome-based education, and they have to make sure, someone from the state has to make sure I'm doing it this way, and it's called explicit instruction. It's the way it works in really, totalitarian countries, where they tell you something, they reinforce it, they have everybody talk about it, the same thing, and you really don't get to think for yourself until the very end when everybody's already agreed that that's the way it should be. So it's really not the kind of strategy I would use. Here are all the new certification codes, because certification is going to be tied really closely to Common Core implementation. It already is. And we're going to watch for changes to certification where they want to line up the pay of teachers with adherence to the Common Core way of doing things. We also have a new system of evaluating teachers. It's called TEAS, Teacher Key Effectiveness System, and Leader Key Effectiveness System. So the teachers are being rated on how their kids score on Common Core-based tests. And the principals, the leaders, are being rated on how those students score on Common Core-based tests. So it's driving everything. Then you also see we have more coaches, instructional coaches in our schools, and those coaches are really the overseers to implement this new system of Common Core. Now, not this legislative session, but the year before, we had a supposedly Common Core withdrawal bill, but it really didn't do anything to take us out of Common Core. In fact, it even increased our state's involvement in Common Core because it continued with the Common Core-based test, it continued with the appointed State Board of Education. Do you realize that the governor appoints the State Board of Education? The governor appoints the Board of Regents. The governor appoints the judges. Everybody who's making a decision about what our kids learn in this state is appointed by the governor. And these bills, we were able to stop them last year, and so I went around right up until the beginning of this legislative session talking about how we need to not let these bills pass, but every single one of them passed. No more separate tests for reading or writing. They don't have to have timely reports. For example, this year, the results of the GMAS test are not going to come back before school starts, which means everybody will pass. There will be no placement decisions made based on those test scores. We're not going to have them back. So they took out the need for timely reports, which would be nice to know how kids did before they start the next school year. They also removed the provision that local school systems could waive the tests that are coming from the state. When I say the tests are coming from the state, they're really not coming from the state, even though they're called state tests. They're coming from a federal mandate, and all the test scores are being reported to the Department of Education. They're the ones that get the test scores. It's sort of like a pass-through. Everything that we're getting is just passing through our State Department and going from the US DOE to us. Now, another thing that they did is that we used to have alternative assessments for special education students, but they can't do that anymore. The special education students have to take the regular test. And what they're doing, they're saying you can have accommodations for it, which means the computer can read it for you. So let's say you're in special education and you get the state test that's on that grade level. You don't have to know how to read. So your teacher is going to be rated on how you do on this test, but the computer can read it to you. So the teacher doesn't necessarily have to teach you how to read, they just have to teach you how to take that test. That's if you're in special education classes. Another thing is about our virtual learning. Here we have school systems being mandated to pay for virtual learning. The Georgia Virtual Connections Academy is owned by Pearson, a British company. And so I was a local school board member. We had to pay for the virtual learning, but have absolutely no authority over what is on the virtual learning. I mean, that would be totally out of our jurisdiction as to say, well, we don't like this, or we like this, or we should have this or not this. But here, we're overseeing taxpayer money to pay for this. And we have to do it because of state law. We used to have lots of provisions for virtual schools, that they would have to be approved, that they would have to have records of success, teachers, pupil ratios, things like that. All of those things were struck out from the legislation. All of the safeguards for online learning are gone. Something was added. The only thing that they have to have is they don't even have to be approved. They have to have the copyright on those content standards. So whoever owns the copyright, which in this case is McGraw-Hill, is going to have the monopoly over what our kids learn in a virtual learning environment. They also removed the 5-hour minimum for academics at the middle school level, and I'll show you why they did that. Another thing that was shocking to me is they have added the provision that homeschool students have to identify the school district in which they reside. Now that's a blow for homeschoolers, because that's a step towards what's happening in New Jersey, where that local superintendent wants to say that they're the superintendent of the homeschoolers as well, and they have to take Common Core line tests. So it paves the way for that. And I alerted the legislators to this. Even lots of them have homeschool kids themselves. But they still voted for it. Maybe they didn't know. Here's the information about that. And all of this will be up on the Educational Freedom Coalition website. All this PowerPoint for you to download if you would like to look at it more closely. Now, this is going to get a little mathematical here, so stay with me about this one, but I want to tell you about how our teachers are going to be rated. And it's not how you think they're going to be rated. You would think that teachers would be rated on how well students did on tests, right? Did they increase their reading level? Did they increase their math level? I mean, that would be what you would think normally. And then when they say, we're going to have it rated on student growth, you think, well, that's great. But see, it's a trick. The growth they're talking about is not actual growth. One year they take the Common Core test, and let's say it's in 4th grade when they don't even have to know multiplication or long division, 2 by 2 multiplication or long division. all they really have to know is measurement and some fractions. They're going to rate all those kids, and they're going to put them in order, you know, say from 1 to 100. And they're going to put them in 4 quartiles, and they're going to rank them. And then they're going to have that ranking that year. The next year, they're going to take another Common Core test, a completely different test on completely different standards. And then they're going to rank them again. If they fall in the same exact spot, according to this, they didn't grow. But the test cannot measure growth because the test only measures lower level standards that are very grade specific. So if that student is doing 7th grade math and they're in 5th grade, the test will not detect that. It will only detect how compliant that teacher is to those Common Core standards, even if those standards are way too low. And I analyzed every single one. They're way too low. And here's the trick that they did. I had an analysis of all the standards, the former NCTM, the Massachusetts, the former Georgia Performance Standards, the Common Core, international, everything. I proved that they were 1 to 2 years behind. They revised the standards. This is the set of revised standards. They moved 1 standard. We had integrated math, which I'll call it, you know, mixed up in high school. You don't have algebra geometry. You have analytic geometry and coordinate algebra, all mixed up. So they organized it, and they got the traditional Common Core. Did you know there's more than 1 Common Core? There's integrated, and there's mixed up. There's 5 of them. So we traded with Tennessee. Tennessee had traditional, and we got their traditional. We had mixed up, and Tennessee got our mixed up. God bless Tennessee. Or do they know what they're in for? But so now they're going to say, oh, but we heard your voices, and we went back to traditional just like you wanted, and you can teach math however you want. But it's the same standards, just in a different order. And they moved 1. By law, you can add 15% to Common Core, and it still be Common Core. That's what they said. If you want to add something, it can be 15%, but it's not going to be on the test. So that's a great incentive for teachers to do that extra 15%. And in the 15% that they added back, well, a great thing like gallons and cups and pints and quarts, which, you know, we use that here in America. They added that back, but it's not going to be on the test. So when they revised it, they didn't come outside of the Common Core copyright. It's still Common Core copyrighted. Because that's what they had to do. They had to do that to keep the Common Core. Because they agreed to take Common Core because they took the Race to the Top money from the U.S. Department of Education. So student growth percentiles are fake, and they will make teachers teach the Common Core method at the Common Core pace, even if it's too slow or too fast. Now I'm going to tell you about Lexile. Lexiles are a reading measure. The Lexile points, you get more points for lower level achievement. So when you're in the early grades, it looks like you're really flying through because your Lexile points are just adding up. You just get an incredible number of points. But when you get to the high school level, the Lexile scores taper off. You can go up 2 grade levels and only get a few points. So it's an exponential, the Lexile is an exponential relationship in the reading level. Okay, I'm trying to stay with you with the math, but it gives more points to lower level readers, and it makes you think. If you're in 9th grade and you're scoring 1100, makes you think maybe that's 11th grade. It's not. You only get a few points to go up to 11th grade. So it's a deceptive measure. Who owns it? Well, it's part of our school rating system. It's a bogus measure just just like the student growth percentiles are, but we have to use it because it's owned by these corporations. And it's part of our school rating system. The next thing I want to tell you about is the AP and IB legislation. Now, you've heard, maybe you probably have heard about the AP U.S. history class being anti-American. How many of you have heard about that? You know about that? Okay. Everyone's all up in arms about it. They're passing Senate Resolution 80 to say, oh, we don't want American history to be that way. And it's all just fluff and talk. It's all just baloney. A resolution is non-enforceable, it's complete baloney. Here's what they really need to do. They passed House Bill 131 in 2013, which made AP and IB courses part of the rigor requirements to get the Hope Scholarship. So here you're saying to parents and students, if you want to get the Hope Scholarship, you need to take these AP and IB. Now, AP, we know, is from the College Board, and it's part of Common Core right now because David Coleman took it over. But IB is from International Baccalaureate. It's part of UNESCO. It's part of the UN. We have to pay money to the UN, UNESCO, to have AP classes. So both options, I mean, you really don't have a choice if you want to get the scholarship. So here they're taking Georgia money and they're incentivizing private programs. What do we call that? Corporate fascism? Crony capitalism? Public-private partnerships, if we want to put a sugar coating on it? Corporate fascism. But not only that, we have a new measure called the CCRPI. Senate Bill 410, which was passed several years ago, changed our school rating system. We are not rated based on absolute student achievement. We are rated based on points. And we get points. Our schools get points if they have kids in these programs. So here we double incentivize it. We incentivize it for all the adults, the parents, the students, the schools, because we want to have high school rating scores. If we don't have high school rating scores, what happens? We might get sucked into the Opportunity School District. Have you heard about that? Or, okay, let me just go on. Social studies. I'll get to that part later. We have document-based questions. So that sounds great. We have an attorney here, so we want document-based, we want evidence, we want everything to be about evidence. But who chooses the documents? And do these documents incriminate America? I watched my daughter take AP U.S. History and AP World History, and she was bringing home one side of the story documents. The other side of the story wasn't being told, and she was having to process that and write all kinds of essays about one side of the story. I have some of those documents posted on my website. But these document-based questions aren't just for AP and IB. These are going on in our social studies classrooms all throughout. Here's an example of a Pearson product, Reading Street, a 4th grade textbook, talking about what happened to the Japanese during World War II. And of course, we don't like what happened to the Japanese during World War II. When they were separated from the population, so people thought, we're in a war against the Japanese. But that was unconstitutional. But they don't say that was unconstitutional. You don't get the whole story. You just get what America did wrong. You don't get what America did right. And this is happening in 4th grade. Now, you look at the science standards. Unverifiable climate science, global warming, catastrophic global warming. We don't have Common Core science standards yet. We don't have Common Core social studies standards yet. But at the State Board of Education meeting, they said that's what they're up to next. They're about to revise them. They figure they're finished with math and English, math and language arts, Notice reading's gone. We don't have reading anymore. It's called language arts. And now they're going to do science. And you're not going to see evolution as evolution. You're going to see it called common ancestry. Molecules to man, common ancestry. Taught as fact. That's what you're going to see. And did you know Obama appoints the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? He appoints those people. So they're an arm of the Obama administration. And our kids are going to be learning, if this is approved right now, we don't see it yet, but it's coming. Common Core Science and Social Studies. Now I'm going to talk about the Duncan Brownie points. This is Arnie Duncan. He is head of the U.S. Department of Education. He was appointed by Obama. Now it really wouldn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter who he is. He could be, anybody. Whoever's behind this. There's someone else behind him doing all of this. And so he has this whole system with the school rating scores. And like I said, our whole school rating system has changed. Here's an example of the College and Career Performance Ready Index. And 60% is for achievement, 25% is for progress, like I showed you what the progress score was. 15% is achievement gap closure. That's bringing your lower learners up so that there is not a gap between the lower learners and the higher learners.
Not bringing the higher learners down?
That's a good question. And so what happens is, here's a school that had a score of 92.1, and the very next year, they had a score of 74.8, with relatively the same scores. So what's happening here? You can get pretty much the same scores, but go from 92 to 74 in your CCRPI score. Because you got the points already for closing the achievement gap, you already closed it, so you can't close it again, so you can't get those points again. And so what happens is, these are performance flags. You get extra points if you are economically disadvantaged, if you are English as a second language, if you're a student with disabilities, if you're non-white, if you're Hispanic, all these different categories. So you could be a student who is African American, economically disadvantaged, special education, and you could get lots of points for your school like that, because you're counted more than once. So here we have a school rating system where some students count more than other students. And that's the flag system from the U.S. Department of Education. We agreed to this system when we passed Senate Bill 410. This is an example of how you can get points based on your ethnicity. If you are Asian, if you want to get extra points, you have to score 95.2. If you're black, you can get extra points, and you only have to score an 81.9. Straight from the Race to the Top grant application. That's what we did. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation helped us out quite a bit with that application. So, what's in it for them? Every year, the performance targets increase. So every year, even with the same scores, the CCR score will go down, even with the same exact score. Schools are made to look like they are failing. It's a trick. Here's an example. So schools are going to be grasping for points. They're going to need the points. Because if they don't get the points, there are going to be consequences depending on what kind of school system they are. get points for having world language courses, for having a dual language school, for being a charter system, using the College and Career Academy. You can get points for positive behavior interventions and supports. Now, what positive behavior intervention and supports is, it's behavior modification. That's what they're doing with positive behavior intervention and supports. They're calling it a nice name, but it's an initiative of the U.S. Department of Education. And it's sort of like this. Your student is in a class, they get points for every little thing. For doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. And they add up all these points. So it really kills internal motivation when you have to get points for everything. And then CCRPI points, they say CCRPI points are behavior modification for school officials, because the school officials are running around trying to get points too. The kids are all running around trying to get points, and the school officials are too. What happens if you don't get the points? Well, it depends on your school board. Let me skip to this one over here. There's lots of awful things in these points, but I'll skip it to this one here. Okay. Are you a charter school, a charter system, or investing in educational excellence? Which one are you?
Charter system.
You're a charter system. Okay, here's what you get for being a charter system. You can get waivers from state law. Here are the waivers you can get. You can waive the class size maximums. You can waive having 65% of your budget being spent on instruction. You can waive the salary minimums for experience in education for your teachers. Now, all school systems in Georgia have minimums from the state, but on top of that, you pay your teachers more. So this waiver doesn't say you can't pay them more. It says you can pay them less than the state salary schedule. That's what the waiver says. And it also says that certification is not necessary. So we have an increase in Teach for America teachers who aren't certified, and guest teachers, international teachers from other countries who don't have to be certified. So all the things that you get to waive because you are a charter system are all the things that would benefit your students normally, that you would normally think would benefit your students. You can't waive the teach, you can't waive the leaks, you can't waive the CCRPI points, you can't waive the PBIS, you can't waive the APIB, you can't waive Common Core. But you can, what they've done in the past few years is they've told school boards you can waive class size minimum. Oh, that should be minimums. Oops. You can waive class size. Oh yeah, class size max. A certain number of students in a class you can't have anymore. Nice. You can waive that because we don't have so much money. We don't have a lot of money in the budget, so you can waive that. So school boards have gotten used to doing that, putting more kids in classes. And then all of a sudden they say, now if you want to waive it, you have to be charter. You have to be IE2. But what do they get from being IE2? If you don't have a minimum of CCRPI score, and there was a bill that they had of 80, then they could take your schools. They could take your school. That one didn't pass. I think I'll talk about the bills now. Okay, here, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Here are all the bills that passed this last legislative session that we fought against, but they passed anyway. House Bill 91. It eliminates the high school graduation test. That is the only test we had that wasn't Common Core aligned. It replaced it with tests every year in every grade for math and language arts that are based on the Common Core. So now those end-of-course tests that are Common Core aligned, those are the ones you have to pass, instead of having just one at the end. And the one at the end used to be about reading and math and writing and science and social studies. These, we don't have reading as a separate subject anymore, because now the computer can read it for you. All this is on the Educational Freedom Coalition website. Senate Bill 89 passed. It gave complete authority to the State Board of Education over all digital and print resources. If I, as a school board member, wanted to do something different, get a different resource, I would have to ask my superintendent, and my superintendent would have to get 5 superintendents to go along with requesting to the State Board of Education to have something different. If I was a teacher and I wanted to have something different from what the State Board of Education has decided I was going to have, I would have to get 20 teachers, all certified and teaching in the subject that I'm teaching, to all get together and request to the State Board of Education this other resource. So there's a monopoly right now on educational print and electronic resources, and it's all owned by Common Core. Senate Bill 156 set up the nonprofit private charter foundation. Senate Bill 132. We have dual enrollment beginning in 9th grade, but that's work-based learning. I don't believe I talked about the work-based learning, but what they did last year in House Bill 766 was they removed the requirement that students be paid for work-based learning, which means that students have to do it for their career pathway, career cluster pathway for graduation, and they are not compensated. Senate Bill 164 set up PBIS, Behavior Modification for All. Senate Bill 2 said they don't really even need to go to 11th and 12th grade, because the career counselor, according to House Bill 400, will choose whether they're college or career. And we see this at the federal level too, the new Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It doesn't say college and career, it says college or career. So the decision's going to be made whether they're college or career, and if they're not college, then they're going to be career, which means they're going to be in the technical fields. All the career clusters are owned and copyrighted by Achieve, the same organization that came up with Common Core. So every career that our students will be able to choose from is going to be part of this government system that is copyrighted. Okay, House Bill 502. They removed the language that said that there would be parent and student discretion over what is learned. That is completely gone. And House Bill 474 changed the admission policies for charter schools so that it gives priority to educationally disadvantaged and military students. They consider educationally disadvantaged some of those same subgroups that I talked about earlier that got the flags. If you're educationally disadvantaged, you have priority admission to the charter schools. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the charter schools. Charter schools. Okay, charter schools are really Duncan Direct, which means all the charter schools, they have to get CCRPI points to stay open. They don't have locally elected officials. They're completely accountable to the USDOE to stay open. So they have to get CCRPI points to stay open. So when you really think about it, oh, we have Common Core, but we can go to charter schools and everything will be fine. No, it would be even worse in charter schools. The recovery school districts, have you heard about that? Nobody's heard about that? Okay, that means that this is going to be on the ballot in 2016. And it's going to say something like, should the state be able to intervene in failing schools? And a normal thinking person would say, yes, the state should. But mean that at all. When you read the legislation that goes along with it, it means that the governor will appoint an opportunity school district superintendent who will pick whatever schools that they want based on CCRPI or whatever other criteria. There's no set criteria. Get those schools, put them in the opportunity school district, and turn them over to the for-profit charter schools, make them into charter schools of some sort. It's sort of like a holding pattern, and then they go out to be privatized with the charter schools. And the charter schools have completely no elected representation. So what they're really saying when he says, your education shouldn't be determined by your zip code, what he's really saying is there are certain zip codes where we should not have locally elected officials. The government should come in and run it all. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the early learning. Okay, this is to me probably the most serious point, and that is that the governor took a $51 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education to change early learning from birth through 5, to own it. And it's called quality rated. So they're trying to really shut down private in-home daycares and make it so that it's Common Core for babies. When do they sit up? When do they crawl? When do they walk? Because originally, Jason Zimba, the lead author of the Common Core State Standards, wanted the decision about whether they were college or career to be made in kindergarten. Arnie Duncan said 2nd grade. Here's the information about that. Ensuring that quality program standards are applied to all learning programs in the state. And here are the empowerment zones for the $51.7 million Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant. This is not even run out of our State Department of Education. It's run directly under the governor's office. Also, we know that the student loan overhaul was approved by Congress, which means that all the student loans are not privatized, they're owned by the government now, so the government can control higher ed as well. Data collection. I was trying to get everyone to not give the GMAS. I talked to Richard Woods. I said, you really don't have to give it to everybody. You could just give it to the Race to the Top districts, but he decided to give it to everybody because once you start that data collection, that is what's going to lock everybody in. Okay, I think I finished everything there. This was my original defense list of bills we need to stop. Basically, they pretty much all passed. Here are my offense bills. A Georgia FERPA, which would be a Georgia Parents' Bill of Rights, to put parents back in charge. Parents have no authority. School board members have no authority. We need to elect the commissioner and board members of the Professional Standards Commission. Certification is run by appointed people. I talked with Kelly Hansen from the Professional Standards Commission that certifies teachers, and I asked him, I said, with all this teaks and leaks, and they're really prescribing all the professional development for the teachers out of the same teaks and leaks system. I said, what about parents? What if parents want the teachers to have a different kind of professional development? And he told me, I'm sorry, but teaks and leaks trumps what parents want. And that's because he's appointed by the governor, and that whole commission is appointed by the governor as well. They've signed a contract with Pearson so that at Mercer, in our teacher education program, our students have to pay Pearson $300 so Pearson can evaluate the portfolio to see if they get certified. So our teacher certification is connected to Common Core and run by Pearson. Okay, pass these bills. Number 3, elect the State Board of Education, include term limits, elect the Board of Regents. We need to make sure our accreditation is also compromised. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools has been bought out by Advanced Ed, which is the chairman of Advanced Ed is Phil Jacobs. He was also placed on the Professional Standards Commission. And his Mark Elbert, which is his person at Advanced Ed, is a partner with the Council of Chief State School Officers to implement Common Core. So accreditation is really owned by these same people who are implementing Common Core. It's all connected. So we need to have accreditation here within Georgia that's not owned by outside companies. We need to revise the standards now. The standards, I just go on and talk about that forever, but they're really not beneficial to our students because they don't test reading. Math is messing our kids up, and I see it every day. Remove authority from the governor from the birth through 5 programs, shut down the unelected councils that oversee the charter schools. We need to make sure that if someone's term is unexpired and they leave office, that person is elected, not appointed, because right now Richard Woods is sort of in a funny situation because if something happens to him or if he leaves his office, someone is going to be appointed, and that person who's going to be appointed is going to be appointed by the same person who appoints everybody else. So it puts him at really a disadvantage, and it's hard for him to really do his job. Okay. Local board members and local school superintendents should be elected. Right now we have appointed school superintendents, and those appointed school superintendents report to the same accreditation certification agencies that are running Common Core. And then you have the Georgia School Board Association, which is training school board members and telling them that they can't really do anything. In their training, that's what they learn, that they can't do anything. I know, I went to the training. That we're silenced, we can't micromanage, we can't really even talk. I was told I couldn't even talk to school personnel. I wasn't even allowed to talk to school personnel. If I did talk to school personnel, I would be violating the code of ethics. So they're really trying to, make that superintendent so powerful because that superintendent is appointed and accountable to GSBA and the certification people. Now, the way certification works for leaders in Georgia is you cannot be certified to be a leader in Georgia unless you are in a position. And to be in a position, you have to be under this TEKS and LEAKS so that they make sure you're doing the Common Core. Other than that, you can't have leadership certification. Okay, here are bills we need to repeal. Senate Bill 410, these are all on the website. I'll just go through these real quick. These are all ones that we need to repeal. This one took away our direct reporting of student achievement in the way schools are rated. I already talked about House Bill 131 that added the rigor requirements. House Bill 244 linked teacher evaluation to Common Core implementation. 766 was the work-based learning that eliminated the ability for students to be paid. 115 makes it so this really puts school board members at risk because if a school board member doesn't go along with the program and they get sued, the public can't pay for their legal defense. It has to come out of their own pockets personally. House Bill 283, they expanded this database. There is a database that has all the information about every single thing you want to know about a student. It's called the Statewide Longitudinal Data System, and everything is in there. This established, House Bill 797 established a charter commission, and their job was to secure federal and other institutional grants to establish the commission. So they're accountable not really to the voters, to the citizens, even though they're receiving tax money, they're accountable to the federal government and the institutions that are funding them, which right now, a lot of that money is coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Senate Bill 289, maximize online learning. Everybody has to take an online course, and of course the virtual school is owned by Pearson, which partnered with Bill Gates. Now Pearson and Bill Gates are in a partnership, Microsoft. This is House Bill 400. This is what really set up this whole career system where the teacher advisor, the counselor, has to approve your career pathway. And it takes the parents and the student secondary. And these advisors, they're not going to be able to do whatever they want. They're going to have to go by whatever is on these tests that are given. So they're not even going to have the authority to do it. So, House Bill 84 established a code of ethics, really silenced, I call it the school board member gag law. And you know what? When I think about Tea Party, I think about taxes, and I think about, well, the government is taxing us, and they're taking our money, and they're taking our time, and that gets us upset, right? But if you look at the children, and you look at their faces, and you look, whose image do you see on their faces when you look at the children? Whose image do you see? I believe that kids are made in the image of God, and they belong to God. And we as parents have them for a little while, and we love them, we teach them. They're our responsibility. We're accountable for them. But if you think about what Common Core has done, Common Core wants us to give our children to the government. I mean, they've already taken our money, our tax money, but now they're taking our children. And there's some point where we have to stand up and say, you cannot have our kids. You just can't have them. You can't do whatever you want to them. Because God has given us as parents that responsibility, not you, the government. Okay, so I'm going to finish with these 3 Bible verses. I'm going to start with these, but I said I'm going to finish with these instead. And I believe this is the Judeo-Christian heritage that our country and our state was founded on this, that parents are responsible for teaching their children, not the government. According to Deuteronomy, fix these words of mine in your hearts and mind, and teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. The school wants to be there to feed them 3 meals a day and to teach them everything that they want them to learn. And we can't even send in cupcakes anymore because they can't be homemade. They have to be store-bought. I don't know if you've heard about this. But I made some cupcakes today, and I brought them, and they're homemade cupcakes, so eat them at your own risk. We're not allowed to do that anymore. And you know, parents, in order to come to a school, they have to pass a background check. They have to be fingerprinted before they can come into their own public school. It's trying to keep the parents at arm's distance. And I don't think that's going to be successful. 2015 marks the 50th year since the inception of the U.S. Department of Education. And we want to proclaim 2015 as the year of Jubilee for American children. The year of Jubilee is when we say goodbye to the U.S. Department of Education and say, we don't need your influence, we don't need your money, we don't need your overreach. The founders of our country fought for freedom. Let us continue in the freedom granted to us through divine providence and intervention. Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Okay, I think I went through everything. So, that's why I'm here to tell you about what's going on. I need your help.
Questions? I'm sure there must be. I know we have at least one teacher in the room, and maybe you would like to have a comment or a question?
You saw me nodding my head through the whole time. I am so frustrated with the job pathways thing. I'm a primary school teacher, and to see what they're steering little guys into is so frustrating. Is that really going to be where, if you are interested or show a skill level in a certain subject, are you going to be steered that way, whether you really like it or not?
It doesn't
And
really
that-
matter.
That is what I'm really concerned about, is that what you're interested in when you're in the third grade is nothing like what you're interested in when you're in the sixth or seventh and all that
They
kind of thing.
care
But
what you're interested in. They care where they need those children to be slotted. That's what they
Well,
care.
but there too, I wanted to know is like if you're good, some of my little guys are good in math, but they don't enjoy math, but they have a talent in it. And I'm already going, well, does that mean that they're going to steer them in whatever career pathways that tend to align with your math abilities and that kind of thing? And is that what's going to happen eventually as they move up in school?
Well, this is what's going to happen. These are in our legislation. These are the defined career clusters owned by a chief. So this is what the companies have decided they want workers for. So there are favored companies. And those favored companies will receive the workers. So it is now illegal to delay or deny placement in special education. They're targeting the special education for limited learning for lifelong labor. And that is going to be,
Okay, fill me in on that because I'm a special ed teacher. So what exactly is that?
okay, if you're a special education teacher, your kids will have the accommodation that the test will be read to them by the computer. So they don't necessarily need to learn how to read to do well on the test. If they learn how to read, I mean, that would be up to the teacher, but the teacher's not going to be rated on that. So they're going to be tracked as early as second grade or kindergarten into these career pathways. They're calling them career pathways. And so, for example, you have these college and career academies that are springing up. And lots of money is going into getting those going. We had in Troup County, which is near us, we had Kia give $600,000 for a college and career academy. Why did Kia, who has a plant in Troup County, give that money for the college and career academy? Because they want to be involved in that so they can get the workers. And those workers will have to, that's why they reduce the academics. They reduce the academics and the seat time so they could be the workers. And now, starting in 9th grade, they can be the workers. Now they don't even have to finish 11th and 12th grade, they can be the workers. So everything is geared toward a planned economy.
More or less means that if you come up through school and you put in one of these little groups, that's essentially the only path you had to go, right?
Yes, and here's how they've incentivized the schools. Let's say you start in cosmetology, and you've done the first course of cosmetology, which that's one of the career pathways. If you want to switch out of cosmetology, maybe you don't like the odors coming from the perms or the nails or whatever, you can't get out because the school will only get CCRPI points if you finish that pathway. So it's really not a pathway that you can get off of. Because the counselors aren't going to want you to do that because it's costing them points. Yes.
And then in the not too near future, when you become that factory worker or that cosmopolitan or whatever, nail finisher, you will be there for your life. That's the end of the story.
Until there's not a need for cosmetologists. That's where the lifelong learning comes into play. And there's no need maybe to transfer you into some other field that a business decides is necessary.
That is absolutely Marxist.
Well, it's not. What you're looking at is the communist. If you go and study education history throughout the communist countries, this is what you're seeing. It is
Muslim
work-
women don't need cosmetology. And that's where we're headed.
This is, think about, one of the examples, think about Dr. Benjamin Carson. If they would have career path Dr. Benjamin Carson as a young child, where would he be career path? It certainly would not be a neurosurgeon. So this right there shows you how ridiculous this program is. It's communism is what it is. Sorry, that's big C word.
And it's putting someone who may not care about the child in charge of the decision. You have a question?
This is very depressing talk, but I got a very simple bottom line here. What you're talking about is that 18 years from the day the Common Core is instituted, and they start taking over the lives of babies before they're 5 years old, the United States will cease to exist and every worker will be a slave in a new society. I mean, that's the word. And in fact, our legislators, our governors, complicit in it, just blows me away.
Yeah, I went to just about every single House and Senate Education Subcommittee listening session around the state, telling them, bringing them my study of all the standards, showing them that kids could do way more than what Common Core was requiring. And by the time I got to Savannah, they were just like, we already heard what you had to say. You know, I drove all the way to Savannah, and they wouldn't let me talk because
You didn't have any money.
they wanted to know who was paying me to be there, and I said, nobody.
There was a trip of legislators that went down to Louisiana. Do you know what that was all about?
Yes,
Yes, it's
What was that?
that was to sell the Opportunity School District. So now, if Fayette County is about to do this, they're about to be an IE2. If they become an IE2 in 5 years, if any of their schools fall below an 80, in one of the bills it was an 80, in the Opportunity School District it was a 60. If you fall below those points, and the points are going to go down every year because the targets go up every year, then you get taken over by the state, which of course is the appointed people.
Which is, of course, by the Fed.
Yes, really everything is coming from the feds. Yeah, the state, I don't look at the state and I don't see anyone there making any decisions outside of what the feds want.
Why do we elect the state school superintendent if he has no power?
Well, I think that position used to have power, but they're trying to take that power away because it's the only elected position that can actually do something, but he can't really do anything because an elected person reporting to appointed people, that's what we have.
He's reporting to them.
He reports to the appointed people. And I don't think that elected people should have to report to appointed people.
Yeah. That's the way it was.
Yes.
You said something somewhere in your presentation that you tried to talk to teachers and you weren't allowed to do that, or you cannot do that. But obviously,
As a board member, yes. Someone once accused me of talking to one of the principals, and a principal called me and I answered the phone, and then they called an executive session to tell me, how dare you talk to this principal? I was like, I answered my phone. She happened to have my number, and I answered my phone. And it was only because they were trying to look for something, because I kept voting no to everything.
okay. I misinterpreted that, but the purpose of my question is, you must be talking to school teachers.
Me?
Yeah.
As a board member?
No,
As a parent?
just as a private citizen, you must have some interface with some teachers somewhere in this state.
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm a teacher.
yeah, I understand. Okay, so what is their general consensus in this? Because I cannot believe that there are more than 5% of the teachers that would put up with this crap.
They're leaving. We received many teachers from other states who left because it was happening in other states. Then they got here and they're like, well, why should I leave Georgia? It's happening everywhere. A lot of teachers are leaving. We're losing our best teachers.
So we're ending up with really not teachers, but wardens.
Yes, because when it all becomes digitized and everything is done electronically, which is the move, they have these systems that they don't have. In fact, one of the bills they passed this year, by 2020, everything has to be in electronic form. You don't need a teacher. You just need a computer.
On your website, do you identify all these different corporations that are involved with this and who the people are? behind these corporations? You mentioned a number of different corporations that are involved in Common Core.
Yes. Well, it's mainly McGraw-Hill and Pearson, but they're all interrelated because McGraw-Hill is the one that holds the copyright, but then they sold to an international group called Apollo, and then Pearson bought some of McGraw-Hill, and Pearson is out of the UK, and 3% of, yes, 3% of Pearson is owned by Libya. I saw an alphabet, and the alphabet had a picture of a dog, and it had the letter H. And then we were trying to figure out, okay, dog age. Oh, it's from England. It's a hound. So in England, they're using the hound for H. But then when it gets over here, and our State Department of Education approved one or two choices for our new reading series, and one of them is called Imagine If, and they hold the copyright. And their alphabet, every single kindergarten is going to have this H dog. And then they're going to have to tell the kids it's a hound. But the British kids already know it's a hound because they know it as a hound. That's how much they're controlling us.
I wanted to ask you, since the children is not going to benefit by what is going on, who's going to benefit? You just have to throw a bill.
They're trying to take us down to the left.
And Libya owns, I don't know if right now it's true, but at one point Libya owned 3% of Pearson. Libya. So then you're not going to see anything anti,
As well.
yeah, you're not going to see anything like that. Because your state standards are owned by people from outside our country.
Well, that's a religion of peace.
What's that, early learning for the baby, what's that called?
Right from the start. You want me to get to that?
No, just want to know what it's called. I think that's where they're gonna start issuing the prayer robes.
They'll take their naps.
So here are my recommendations. My recommendations are, we need to really pray that God would, change it. Because just one person, just one group, we can't do it. I mean, it's overwhelming because it's coming at us from every direction. And just tell as many people as we can and try and get to our legislators. Marty Harbin, Mike Crane from my area, they're standing up. They're standing up for this. And they're the only two that I know right now that are standing up for us. I hope they get reelected. Yes?
One of the problems I see that's really difficult, you talk about the Board of Regents. As ordinary citizens here, we don't know who we should elect to the Board of Regents of the university, but we know that the universities are a source of most of our problems in the education field. And so, how do you do that? How do you elect members to the Board of Regents?
Okay, I would just like to elect them. Right now, they're appointed by the governor.
I know.
So, you know what the Board of Regents did? I'm in teacher preparation. They made it so that all of the public institutions have to get this accreditation from CAPE. And CAPE used to be, OK, Georgia people, but they were taken over by the Common Core people, and they have gone to the universities and said, all teacher preparation programs, none of you are going to get accredited because you don't have the right assessments. And what they really mean by that is that you haven't bought our assessments.
And bought into their lives.
Right. They have you go about trying to come up with assessments. That's what these SLOs are. They have the district come up with SLOs. And then just to say, oh, that's not reliable, now buy our SLOs. They want you to put in all this work just to say, no, it's not reliable, it's not valid, it's not scientific. You can just buy it. And then, oh yes, that would be way less work because it's so much work making these. That's what they're doing.
Does your website have a running dictionary of all of these terminology that you're using, like SLOs and CCIXY? Or
SLOs, student learning objectives.
You're not supposed to understand that.
I guess I need to put an alphabet soup up there, yeah, I need to put that up there.
Is everything that you've shown on the screen on your website? I could not take notes fast enough.
You know, I will put this on the educational, I'll go back to the beginning, the Educational Freedom Coalition website. There is a section there for presentations, and then the PowerPoint, I'll just upload it right there under presentations. I have a whole bunch of them up there, so just go to the one at the top will be this one. I haven't done it yet, but I'll put it up there when I get home.
And I have videotaped this tonight, and so I'm going to put it up on YouTube, and I'll be emailing out the link so everybody can look at it. Now that is if everything works right. I'm going to upload it.
And I want to thank Karen Bracken. Karen Bracken, will you stand up, please? Karen Bracken has been fighting Common Core in Tennessee, and she has an email that she sends out every once in a while about what's going on there. So we sort of compare notes because the same tricks they're trying to pull here, there's some same things they're trying to pull over there. And really nationwide, we've had a lot of fake Stop Common Core legislation, we have a lot of rebranding, but we haven't had anyone get out of it yet. And we really need to be the state that gets out of it first, so we can fix this and get our kids back learning math so that they can do it math.
The way I understand it now is if you're homeschooled and you're taught our traditional values, how are you going to pass a test to get into college if you're not taught the Common Core standards? That's you're taught at home.
Well, Common Core standards are lower than what we used to teach. They're lower standards.
Well, I've seen examples of these math problems that they bring up. If you're not taught to think that way, how can you pass that? How can you pass that test?
What they're doing is they're showing you all the 18 different ways to do the same thing, and maybe that's fine for someone who's going to be a teacher to know 18 ways. But when you don't even know one way and you're trying to teach them 18, it doesn't really work. So Common Core really only goes up to Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, basically maybe a little bit of trigonometry, but it doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't go to calculus. It doesn't go to pre-calculus. So you'll see next year, here's what you'll see. I'll predict next year. Next year, there's going to be a drastic drop in seniors taking calculus. They're not going to be taking AP calculus, they're not going to be taking regular calculus, because the Common Core math will have gone into the 4th year, and they're just not going to be taking it. So you're going to see, and then the year after that, the ones going into college, you're going to see a disaster. Yes?
Did you get free community college here in Georgia yet?
No.
You will. Tennessee has free community college for the first 2 years. So what you're going to see is students who are graduating high school because they didn't take calculus or pre-calculus can't get into college. They can't get into a 4-year university. So they're now going to be redirected. That's why they made it free. Kids will be redirected into community college because you'd be able to get into community college without calculus, without pre-calculus. So they're dumbing it down. Then they're giving you this free community college option to basically hide the fact that your kids are graduating high school and they're dumber than stones.
Somebody got a portion that says slow is the same.
No, you're not going to get that education.
How many states did you brainwash?
Of course it's free, so everybody's directing your children, woo, 2 years of free college, and then we'll send you to university afterwards.
I
Still can't get it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The prayer is the answer to this problem, because it's beyond the point where any 5 groups can control it. Prayer is the answer, but I think as individuals in this room, we have an opportunity to at least grasp this and be of help in a specific way. teach them to read and understand, because I'm just thinking, you know, our founders never, some of them did, but not all of them graduated from Ivy League colleges. They weren't there, but they didn't graduate from those type of colleges overseas before they came. And their basis of learning was their own individual reading. And if we enforce the reading ability in our grandchildren, they can catch their future. They won't have to go to what you call it, free community colleges and get the garbage that's going to be put out. They will be able to go to somewhere to get the type of reading that they need to enhance their, you know.
They predict that in the future, only 20% of the children will be directed to a college path. The rest will be put into the workforce. And that 20% that's going to be directed to the college path will not be your children. Why? They don't call it Common Core for nothing. I said, when you have a Bill Gates and Arnie Duncan and like our state commissioner of education, their children don't go to schools that teach. Bill Gates, their children don't go to schools that teach Common Core. But Common Core is so darn wonderful. Don't you think they want it for their children? I mean, that's such right there that it isn't. They are the children that will be directed. They will be the ones that will be signing the front of the check. Our children will be signing the back of checks. Their children will be signing the front of the checks. And that's, you know, and you saw that about homeschool, God, yes, but we have to get our children out of the public school system. Parents have to step up and start educating their children at home. Grandparents have to start doing it with your grandchildren, because, you know, you'll never get 100% homeschool. If we're looking at 25%, first of all, if you take the public school system down to its knees, 25% of the kids will droop in the system. But there's a lot of colleges today that accept kids without, there's a lot of ways of getting educated and being successful without going to college, without, right? I just read an article where some of the big colleges now are looking for homeschool children. They want homeschool children, not high school graduates. You know, the normal public school high school graduates. So regardless of what happens, I still think homeschooling is the safest option for our kids today. It is.
Yeah, and I think the worst thing that they did this legislative session was eliminate that high school graduation test, because they were so proud of that for some reason, and they have this propaganda that legislators get as to reason why they're doing something, and school board members, the school board sessions are just huge propaganda sessions. Unless you really know what's going on, you can fall for it. And so when they eliminated that, they really opened the door to non-readers graduating from high school.
You don't want your kids to read.
What about the elimination of the 11th and 12th grade? They don't have to take that?
Nope, they don't have to go 11th and 12th. They can graduate without going to 11th and 12th grade because of Senate Bill 2.
In other words, we're going to build more jails.
Well, see, here's the thing. They run out of free labor from the prisons, and so now they're going to the public schools to get it.
There you go.
Eye-opening and distressing, and
Please don't leave without telling us what we can do. You come here and.
Okay, I want you to do this. Do what I did in my community, which was go to my legislators and show them all of this. And they changed their minds and they started voting against this. They started standing up. My legislators in my town are standing up against this, but they're the only ones right now. You need to get your state legislators